Now, normally, out of respect for the victims and their families, I wouldn't even make a video about such a tragic event so soon after it went down. But the level of confusion in statements made over the weekend before barely any facts, let alone most or all of them, were known, needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. Social justice warriors and the regressive left just don't get it when it comes to the topic of terrorism, and they are spreading some rather harmful misconceptions. At the time of the making of this video, the information regarding the attack on the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood clinic, perhaps understandably due to the size of the crime scene, is still coming in at a really slow trickle. But it's at least apparent at this point that social justice warriors and the regressive left probably managed to get at least one thing right. It was almost certainly not a failed bank robbery, and the clinic itself was in fact Robert Louis Deer's primary target.
The new developments overnight in the attack on the Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado Springs. As we come on the air, we're learning so much more about the suspect, his past, his political views, and his potential motive for killing 3 and injuring 9 others.
After the firefight and standoff, law enforcement sources say Deer allegedly made rambling, hostile comments about Planned Parenthood.
It happened at a Planned Parenthood center.
What does that tell you?
My suspicions are that that has a lot to do with the motive.
However, when it comes to the subject of terrorism, domestic or foreign, that's about as deep into the realm of truth as the regressive PC thought police seem capable of venturing, if the ridiculous tweets and comments they made over the weekend are any indication. Republican Mayor John Suthers is trying to suppress reality that Planned Parenthood shooting was right-wing terrorism. Where are you, FBI? Maybe the hashtag FBI should concentrate on hashtag white supremacists instead of hashtag foreign terrorists. Hashtag Planned Parenthood shootings. I bet the hashtag Planned Parenthood shooter is neither a refugee nor a liberal. But let's ignore this and focus on ISIS. Another day, another white man with a gun, another mass shooting. When will the issue of white terrorism be discussed? Hashtag Planned Parenthood. Okay, so there were a ton of tweets that expressed something similar to this. The idea that domestic white supremacist terrorism is either covered up, understated, or ignored altogether. It's pretty depressing to me that people are this clueless. Now, I'll explain later in this video why I feel they do so unnecessarily, but the truth is, the feds and law enforcement here in the US take the threat every bit as seriously as they do Islamic extremism.
2 police officers were killed. We have pictures of a couple of the suspects here. Brian Smith and Kyle Jokel are their names in Louisiana, Carol. And this is something that, law enforcement around the country is worried about simply because, again, they never know when they might encounter these people just simply by doing their jobs. For example, enforcing traffic laws or serving a warrant. And this is something that the FBI has been focused on. Here's Michael Steinbach, who's the head of counterterrorism, talking about this.
We've been talking about the international terrorism threat, but there's also domestic groups that are just as concerning that we worry about here in the United States. So you have to look, the FBI and the Counterterrorism Division in particular looks across the landscape, and we spend sufficient resources and spend a lot of time on a variety of threats.
And Carol, for local law enforcement, these are the types of terror threats that they're more likely to encounter.
If you're still not convinced, Steinbeck's statement here offers proof the feds investigate and take seriously threats to Planned Parenthood specifically. The fact of the matter is, back in September, they issued warnings which exactly predicted the events in Colorado Springs on Friday. It is the height of absurdity to suggest officials minimize so-called right-wing domestic terrorism. Another terrorist attack in America against hashtag Planned Parenthood. White supremacist patriarchy is going to destroy us. I have been saying it for the longest time. GOP and the NRA are no better than ISIS. Both profit from the deaths of people Hashtag Planned Parenthood. There is no difference in the sadistic fundamentalist mentality of ISIS and anti-Planned Parenthood domestic terrorists. Hashtag Colorado Springs. LOL at person trying to fight me in the hashtag Planned Parenthood tag. Anyone who thinks the shooting is different than Paris in any way is foolish. And then Born This Sam is foolish enough to point out some very important differences himself, thereby completely nullifying the original ridiculous statement. Look, I understand people are upset and want to contribute to the public discussion in some way, but lashing out with careless exaggerations is not at all helpful when trying to make sense of these tragedies. Sorry, but not all religious extremists, even those with guns, are created equal, despite what my fellow liberals on Twitter and ex-FBI agents may think.
Now, abortion, as you mentioned, is among the services at this Planned Parenthood clinic. It's an issue that has made the organisation a target in the past. What do you make of the kind of people who carry out these attacks at facilities like this?
Well, the people who do this are very similar to ISIS people. They take their violent tendencies and use a religion to justify it, specifically a religion that actually prohibits this kind of violence. So these people are terrorists hiding behind a religion.
It's really unfortunate that it's still necessary to correct statements like this one, but it's wrong in at least two important ways. First, no one is hiding behind a pure and innocent religion and its harmless scripture. Violent extremists are in fact interpreting brutal and backward passages and decrees from their chosen holy books literally. However, the second and more critical way, if you ask me, ex-FBI agent Steve Moore is mistaken here, and this goes for liberals on Twitter as well, is that Islam has not been defanged and declawed to the extent that Western religions have, so making strong comparisons to ISIS is a hopeless task. Islam has not undergone enlightenments and reformations and been subdued by secular legal documents such as the U.S. Constitution. Extremists like Deer are often forced into seclusion and acting as lone wolves, yes, I said lone wolf, exactly because the Bible's grip on the West has been loosened far more than the Quran's in Islamic nations. Whenever Christian nutjobs do try to band together like ISIS and take over a much, much smaller area of land to rule with their own prehistoric laws, they are crushed almost immediately. This diminishment of religious power in the West is also likely the reason behind another critical difference between right-wing domestic terrorists and jihadists. Notice that Deer only targeted one aspect of our society, reproductive health clinics. He didn't target cafes and stadiums and nightclubs and cartoonists and ideals we hold precious like freedom of speech, and on and on and on. Because Christianity has resigned itself to a lesser role in our lives here in the West, its tyranny is therefore weakened and incapable of mustering the strength to target the whole secular shebang we all enjoy. Although a radical like Deer would probably never admit this, the secular influences in his life likely led him to not even wanting to target anything and everything, like jihadists want to do. It seems the regressive left draws encouragement when making these outlandish comparisons between ISIS and extremists here in the homeland from misleading articles like this one in the New York Times. The only necessary words you need to read here are "since September 11th." Everything else is specious nonsense. You know, if you pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, you won't ruin that illusion either. There is no meaningful resemblance between homegrown right-wing terrorists and ISIS, in my humble opinion. A woman shouldn't have to fear for her life while getting routine health care. Time for Republicans to stop demonizing hashtag Planned Parenthood. This is a hashtag war on women, and no woman is immune. Make no mistake, the latest hashtag Planned Parenthood attack is an attempt to terrorize those who need access to critical health care, especially women. Just goes to show how much society really hates women. Hashtag Planned Parenthood. More domestic terrorism from violent right-wing misogynists. The war on women is not a figure of speech. Only in America does a white man who commit domestic terrorism shoot 5 cops, kill 3, injure 9, and still come out alive. Hashtag Planned Parenthood. Actually, only in the minds of social justice warriors could this attack be part of some imaginary war on women. 2 out of the 3 people killed were men, and several other men were stalked and wounded, but managed to escape. Why does a war which supposedly targets mostly women have so many male casualties?
I looked out my left window. I saw a guy crawling towards the door, and I saw the glass shatter. And I saw this man walk in and start shooting into the entryway. And I freaked out. I got out of my car. I was thinking about running, and I changed my mind. Got back in the car, started it, put it in reverse. I started going out, and he saw me, and he came out, and we looked at each other in the eye, and he started aiming, and he started shooting. I saw 2 holes go right through my windshield as I was trying to quickly back up, and he just kept shooting, and I started bleeding, and blood was shooting everywhere. So I don't know what happened. I felt things, and then he was still looking at me, and I drove away. I felt more shots hit the back of my car, I guess.
But a bigger logical problem here for social justice warriors trying to turn this tragedy into their political gain is if they want to scoff at claims of mental illness, they are now inviting under the umbrella of domestic terrorism a bunch of people who don't quite fit their preferred narrative. In fact, if you go check out the FBI's domestic terrorism most wanted list right now, you'll see that there are nearly twice as many women as there are men. Funny how social justice warriors conveniently fail to mention that little fact, huh? As with most firmly held beliefs on the part of the regressive left, this idea that it's all right-wing males, the GOP, the NRA, etc., that we have to fear when it comes to domestic terrorism doesn't hold up to even the slightest bit of scrutiny. And even if it did, you gotta wonder, how long would even just one Planned Parenthood clinic, let alone the hundreds that never suffer a single incident here in the US, last under the rule of the social justice warriors' favorite unfairly beleaguered terrorists, ISIS?